All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're live. It's the Brushfire Mind. It's 8 o'clock on a Sunday night. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope you all had a good turkey day, had a good time with your family. Now let's talk about some stuff. We just went over. I got Cameron on the line with me tonight, and we just went over what we're going to talk about tonight. Looks like our topics this week are the Macy's Day Parade, madness, uh, the thought audit. Woohoo! That's funny shit. Um, there are some developments with the migrant caravans. I hate using those words, but there have been some developments in the what you call it invasion. That's what you call it. And we're going to talk about emails. Of course, we're going to be talking about Ivanka's emails, but in order to talk about Ivanka's emails and the outrage around them, we're going to have to dig into. I will try not to get too deep in the weeds on it, but we will end up, I'm sure, getting a little bit into the weeds on Hillary's emails and why the comparison just isn't even there. There's zero comparison to be made. So, Cameron, you brought up the Macy's Day Parade, and especially since that kind of nicely dovetails in with some of the stuff that Mario and I were talking about last week. Let's start there.
Okay. Well, basically, the Macy's Day Parade had a bit of controversy, and it ties into what you and Mario were talking about last week with normalizing certain sexual behaviors for deviant reasons and so forth. Anyhow, flash forward. I just real quick, I'd like to tell a really personal story about my wife and my sister-in-law who grew up on a farm. And I mean, it was as stereotypical as it got. They got 4 channels on the TV, and they had to go on the roof and change the direction of the antenna if they wanted to get the other 2 channels. It was that kind of existence for them, and they grew up watching the Macy's Day Parade every year because it was one of the only things that was different that would come on. And so, of course, they've had fantasies their entire life about watching the Macy's Day Parade with their children as their parents did with them. And that is a thing that has happened in my house every year ever since Trisha and I have been together. If I'm being really honest, don't hate me, internet. I don't really like watching parades on TV. That's just not fun to me. It's really not, but my wife really enjoys it. So it's a thing that we do. Well, this year there was a little musical number about some prom that was real cute, well done, ton of fun. It was an all-female cast, excellently performed. And then right at the very end of it, there's an 8 to 9 second kiss between 2 women. And now suddenly I have to have conversations with my 4-year-old and my 6-year-old that I just don't think are appropriate to have with a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. And my wife and my sister-in-law agree. And it really sort of soured this whole Christmas experience that is a thing that has happened in my household for the past several years. And I do believe that it was very much a you will be made to care moment because everything was all fun and games, got you all suckered in. My wife and I discussed this for a long time, and she even played devil's advocate. And she was forced to admit that something like the Macy's Day Parade is basically G-rated. And when something is G-rated, there are just certain controversies you don't expect. I think even when you move up to the level of PG, if there's a racy bit of material, well, it was rated PG. But when you slide it in and you sneak it in and you force parents to have that conversation with their children. Mommy, why are those 2 girls kissing? I mean, forget the fact, if I can just be really cynical for a second, that adult Cameron is really kind of okay with women kissing. I mean, whoops, I'm sorry. Yeah, but I admitted that I'm a misogynist or whatever. But as far as my 4-year-old and my 6-year-old and my 5-year-old niece are concerned, that's just not an appropriate conversation to have with them. It was a very deliberate subversion in order to force this on their eyeballs. You wouldn't see it coming. And now this is something that has been introduced to my children that I honestly hope that they can forget. It's just this weird thing. But now I don't want to show them the Macy's Day Parade next year, because what if part of their tradition of watching the Macy's Day Parade growing up includes pushing a boundary and pushing a boundary and pushing a boundary and pushing a boundary and pushing a boundary. I'm just not interested in it. I would, in some ways, personally compare it to the whole situation with the NFL. You wanted to make some social justice warrior point, and you forgot you were just playing a freaking football game. Or in this case, you forgot you were just putting on a parade. Can we have some song and dance and some really cool balloons and things like that? Isn't that the point of a parade? But no, you will be made to care, and we will pervert these things right out in the open. And we will take the choice away from you as a parent to talk about this with your children on your terms. And if you disagree with it, you're a bigot. You're a homophobe. You are all of the different isms and ists and terrible things that the left accuses you of, just because forget the fact that it's homosexuality for a second. On a personal level, I'm very libertarian about it. Whatever makes you happy, you're allowed to do, and I support that 101% all the time. I don't want to talk to my children about sexuality, period. End of sentence. I decide as their parent when that conversation is appropriate. And to not only force the sexuality conversation on them at an early age, but go ahead and include an extra layer that is very complex and very nuanced. It is you will be made to care. It is just a different version of the furries, and they decided to shit right on the Macy's Day Parade with it. So how about that? I didn't write any of that down. It's just been pissing me off for days.
Okay. So Julie's got a couple of comments here. Homosexuality is not something new to the world. Asks the question, would you have been offended to see a man and woman kissing?
If it lasted, I'm sorry, please go ahead. Go ahead.
They will have peers at school that have same-sex parents. Some cultures acknowledge 5 or more types of genders. Okay.
Can I respond to the very first question, because I think it's actually the most important? Would I have been offended if it was a man and a woman that kissed? Well, I've gone back and I've watched it on YouTube a couple of times now, and the kiss lasted for an extremely long time. Much longer than your average Disney kiss at, say, the end of The Little Mermaid. And when you have a kiss that goes on for that long, you are deliberately implying a sexual element to it. Anybody that understands in the teeny tiniest bit how sex works knows that you're not going to have a long kiss with a person without that factor being there. So would I have had a problem with a makeout session with a man and a woman during the Macy's Day Parade? Yes, of course I would. It's a parade. Don't make out in the middle of a parade. As far as the other points, don't let me steal all your thunder, Chris. What you got?
No, that's pretty much what about what I was going to say. Gay or straight, there's a place for things. On parades in general, I do not care for the pride parades, because it's not a gay pride parade. It's not, let's celebrate being gay. You ever been to a pride parade? I've been to a few. Um, it's always about all the other. The parade is about all the fetish stuff, regardless of your sexual orientation. The parades are always all the black leather and animal stuff, and
It's putting the
almost
stuff in the street on purpose.
almost universally almost universally the parades include actual sex acts, which, okay, that's a thing that some people want to do, sure, but don't then pretend like that's a family event. um and we're seeing shares on Facebook and videos on YouTube and trending stories on Twitter. uh Parents with their children watching the pride parade, and there are people performing oral sex on one another, men on women, men on men, women on women. uh,
Hello. Because I got to be honest. That would be an absolute fucking compliment if that's what happened.